Hey everyone, this is Craig Justice, and we've just finished our first week at stay at home during the time of the coronavirus. And I'm going to read for you a little bit of my book about that wine I gave you. And since it's 6 p.m., it's happy hour, I'm going to pour myself a little glass of Tempranillo, right from the vineyard that's right outside here. That's Bluey the dog, by the way, and this book is about him. So cheers. And here we go. About that wine I gave you. Dreams of life, love, and death in the vineyard. The book is dedicated, of course, to Bluey the dog, to my sisters, my parents, the vineyardista and princess, to the winemakers, to the scent sommelier and the muses, the vines, and to all the cougars. Here's an epigraph. Dog is my shepherd, I shall not want. He lies down in shade under the trees. He leads me down rows of vines. He restores my soul. He leads me down paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the shadow of the valley of death, I fear no evil, for dog is with me. He comforts me. I prepare a feast for him. I brush him, and he anoints my head with licks. My glass and tanks overflow with wine. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, while I dwell in the doghouse forever. The Psalm of Paul, the winemaker. So cheers. Chapter 1. Transfiguration. The Gale's crew had fallen behind schedule, and the holes weren't dug. That task was left to us. It takes a village to make wine, and there's nothing like champagne to bring out the neighbors at 7 o'clock on a Saturday morning, and the work went fast. Carrie Ann showed everyone how to plant the bare root vines. Dig a hole 18 inches deep, mold a handful of dirt into a ball at the bottom, and spread the roots over the ball. Backfill the hole with loose dirt, and for extra credit, carve a shallow bowl around the baby vines so water collects and seeps to the roots. Carrie Ann asked everyone to point the vine's notched graft towards the wire, but it doesn't matter where it points. The vine knows what to do. Paul and Bluey started digging. The first hole went fast. The third was work. Bluey began each hole with his paws, removing a half-inch of the softer topsoil. Then Paul took over with his shovel, where the ground was rock hard. Satisfied with his contributions and proving to everyone he could dig, Bluey went to search for shade and someone to rub his belly. He found Jenny Lee, a willing masseuse who put down her shovel for some quality dog time. Visiting from Texas, Jenny Lee had never planted grapevines and enjoyed immersing her hands in dirt, and invited her friend Stephanie, watching from the sidelines, to take her spot. Hey Steph, why don't you put on your big girl's bra and plant some vines while I get some water for the dog? Why don't you ask one of the Mexicans? Jenny Lee's jaw dropped. Did I just hear that? She sure seems to have picked up an attitude since moving to Cali. Despite her reluctance to get dirty, Stephanie was a consistent source of support and encouragement for Carrie Ann during the vineyard's 4-month gestation. After Jenny Lee finished petting Bluey, she and Steph jumped into the kitchen to finish preparing food. After the last vine was planted, Carrie Ann and Steph gathered the volunteers to propose a toast. I took my bayonet and prepared to decapitate the bottle, while Carrie Ann thanked everyone for their help, especially Jenny Lee, who had traveled all the way from Texas, and Steph, who walked side by side with her during the journey. She concluded by roaring, "Welcome y'all to Cougar Winery." With one swift motion, I cut off the bottle's neck to the cheers, hurrahs, and barks, the pressure of the bubbly explosion carrying the bottle's sheer top and shards into the garden. Jenny Lee inhaled, set 2 fingers to her lips, and unleashed a whistle that caused barn owls and bats to screech in their sleep, as Jenny pulled off her turtleneck to a collective gasp. What's she doing? Stripping her jersey to celebrate victory? Revealing a thin halter strap framing a freshly tattooed cougar upon her breastplate. Chapter 2. Genesis in the Vineyard of Eden. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And on the third day of creation, after finishing the world's greatest reclamation project, the Lord said, "Let there be organic vegetables and plants and fruit trees." And so it was that the grapevine appeared on the earth. And God said, "Let durian be the stinkiest of fruits, and the grape the sweetest." And the Lord loved the grape because it was good. Now the vines that produced the grapes, the fruit the Lord loved, required a lot of work. But since God was almighty, he could handle it. In those days, this paradise was called the Vineyard of Eden, where the grapevine was queen of the fruits, before Hebrew historians renamed it the Garden of Eden. So God created the process of fermentation and drank fermented fruit of the vine, which he called ambrosia. Now, some Christian theologians claim Jesus was right up there at the right hand of God at this time and regularly joined the Lord for happy hours, just like now. They also say he patented a method for turning water into wine. But about that, I'm not so sure, because I missed Sunday school that week, the week that was taught, because my parents were hungover. So back to the text here. In the order of creation, the grapevine appeared first and believed she was superior to what came afterwards, especially man. And the grapevine became jealous of man because God paid more attention to the man and to the man's wife than to the vines. God loved the man and the man's wife and gave them everything except the apple and ambrosia, for he knew if he gave ambrosia to man, it would ruin him. And God didn't want man showing up drunk to church. Now the grapevine was even more subtle than the serpent, and said to the reptile, "Why don't you encourage the man's wife to eat the apple with grapes for a more beautiful complexion?" And the serpent followed the grapevine's suggestion. The next day, the Lord was walking in the vineyard in the cool of the day, checking for gophers, thinning leaves, spraying against mildew, and mowing down weeds with the wave of his hand. When he was finished, he wanted someone to talk with and looked for his children, but couldn't find them. "Have you seen the man and his wife?" he asked the grapevine. "Am I my brother's keeper?" she replied. But the grapevine knew the man and his wife had hid themselves and covered their bodies with the large grapes she gave them. "Adam, where are you?" called the Lord. "We're hiding," he answered. "We heard you coming and hid behind the grapevines. We have no clothes and are naked." "Who told you you were naked?" demanded the Lord. "God damn it! Did you eat the apple I commanded you not to eat after I gave you all these grapes?" The Lord was pissed, and in his fury decreed a perpetual punishment on man. Henceforth, he had to toil the soil and be responsible for tending the vines, for the Lord knew there was no harsher punishment. The man was pissed, because now he had to work for a living, and with vengeance in his heart took a shovel to hack down the grapevine. As he approached the vine, she pled, "Please grant me a last drink." The man's anger was softened from a spell cast by the vine, and he agreed to her last request. He took some of her grapes, crushed them into juice, added yeast, shook, and then waited a minute and poured the libation into a grail. She inhaled the aromas from the cup with great ceremony, then took a sip and oohed and awed. "What are you drinking?" "God's ambrosia," she answered, "the drink most pleasing to the Lord." "Why haven't I heard of this?" The good Lord says you're too immature to imbibe," adding in a whisper, "He wants to keep it all for himself. The man raised his shovel and demanded, "Let me taste this ambrosia or die." And the vine passed the cup to the man, who sipped. And it was the most amazing thing he had ever tasted, even more luscious than the juice of his wife. The recipe is a secret known only to me and God. He doesn't want you to have it, because he doesn't trust man. It is I who offer you wine as a gift. Now if you cut me down, this is the last wine you shall ever drink. Wine is the cup of salvation, she said. Drink this and enjoy everlasting life. How can I get more of this drink? Asked the man, whose thirst grew with each sip. Start by not hacking me down. If you cut down the vine of life, you kill the source. I am the vine and you are the branches. If you cut yourself from the vine, you will die. Let's work together. So the man lowered his shovel and she continued, You care for me, and I'll produce grapes for you. I'll teach you how to prune grapes, or I'll teach you how to turn grapes into wine. I shall be your vine, and you shall be my people. And in the fullness of time, you'll have as many bottles of wine as there are stars in heaven. And your New York descendants will have a monopoly on wine distribution. Deal, said the man. Whenever you drink of the fruit of the vine, do so in remembrance of me. Cheers, said the man. Wait until Eve tries this. And his wife joined them, and they drank to the bottom of the cup. Later that afternoon, the Lord, walking through the vineyard, found the man and his wife passed out and mourned the loss of his creation. So woman and man became caretakers of the grapevine, and the fall of man began when he worshipped wine more than God. And footnote, for the record, man's original sin was getting Eve drunk. Man and his wife believed they were masters of the grapevine, but she, the subtlest of all creation, had a long-term game plan. With instructions from the vine, man took cuttings from the vine's branches and inserted the sticks into the earth's fertile soil to propagate new varietals. Cabernet Franc and Sauvignon Blanc begat Cabernet Sauvignon. Pinot Noir and Cinsault begot Pinotage. Dr. de Reef and Syrah begat Petit Syrah. And so begat so-and-so, and on it went. The first year, the man and his wife and their sons pulled fledgling grapes off the young vines to strengthen their roots. The second year, the vines grew taller, and the vines grew taller than the man, and he dropped the fruit to make the vines even stronger. The third year, they harvested the grapes and made a blush wine, and it was pretty good, especially on a hot summer day. The fourth year, they harvested the grapes and made a wine that washed down the pasta pretty well. As the years passed, the vines waxed stronger, and the vine improved, and the Lord took fewer walks through the vineyard. And as the Lord was seen less often by the man, he drifted further and further away from his Creator, and grew fonder and fonder of the wine, to the point of worshipping the cup. Each year the vines grew stronger, while the man grew older, and while the drink made by the grapes improved with age, the man did not, imperceptible at first, but with each year, an ache in the hand here, a pain in the knee here, there, and over the years the ailments compounded. In his youth, man believed he was master of the vine, and harvested the grapes and perfected the craft of fermentation. But the grapevine seduced man with flowery scents and harmonious melodies, and tired him with rewards of wine central to her plan. The vine served wine to man for lunch, and suggested he emulate the lifestyle of his Mediterranean cousins. And he started taking siestas and worked less and gained weight. And while he slept, the vine grew taller and stronger. "Plant more," she whispered, and the man obeyed, believing more vines and more wine would make him happier. And he planted more, and they multiplied, and he became ensnarled in a vicious addiction that seemed as pleasant as a new leaf in spring. The vines sang hypnotic songs in the vineyard that German poets called Lorelei, about a siren above the river Rhine who lured ships to crash on the rocks. Lorelei was a grapevine, and she and other vines cast spells over men with their enchanting music. As the years passed, there was no economic logic for man to continue making wine. He expended all his energy in the vineyard and earned no money from his labor, other than to quench his thirst and of his craving. One afternoon, after drinking his fill of fermented fruit, the man awoke, and his beard was long and white, and the vine was tall and green, and the vine wrapped her tendrils around the man's ankles, and although the man was tired, he brushed her back. The vine persevered, and the next year wrapped herself around his thighs, and the man could only train her back to his ankles. And it was the beginning of the end. For in the end the man would succumb, and the vine would rule. And when she ruled, she would suckle birds of the vineyard that nestled between her breasts and with her grapes. And that was the way Mother Nature intended. The man would die, be cremated, and his ashes spread in the vineyard to nourish the vines, which was their ultimate victory. Now, you may dream of owning a vineyard. The vines will seduce you with wine and song, consume all of your time, drain you, kill you, and then devour you. Revelation of Paul to wannabe winemakers.